Parking is probably something that the average North American driver doesn't really think much about. After all, the US and Canada has an abundance of large parking lots with free parking for pretty much anybody who has a car.
No one never knows if the trains are actually going to be on time. It has happened that people are standing for an hour and a half on the platform waiting for the train with no substitute buses or anything.
Imagine waking up in Paris. You step outside and within minutes you see bicycles zipping past, electric scooters gliding quietly, buses pulling up right on time, and the rumble of the metro beneath your feet. Transportation in Europe is like a living network, weaving people through cities and countries as smoothly as veins carry blood through the body. Now picture waking up in Los Angeles. The streets stretch wide, filled with cars as far as the eye can see. Highways loop around like giant rivers of steel, and while buses and trains exist, most people still rely on the car waiting in their driveway. Europe and the United States both have advanced transportation systems, but the way they are built and the way people use them are strikingly different. This is a map of Europe's railway system. It covers over 30 countries, and each yellow line represents a train route.
Well, Europe is synonymous with rail travel, but it's often a bumpy ride for passengers traveling between the rail networks of bordering countries.
Just look at how dense it is. You can barely find a spot on this map without some kind of rail coverage. Now compare that to the United States. This is the passenger rail network across the country, and while there are pockets of good service, mostly in the Northeast, huge areas of the U.S. simply aren't covered by Amtrak, the main passenger train operator.
New Yorkers are on edge as violent crime throughout the city's subway system reaches new highs.
I would say, unfortunately, crime has been a deterrent for some people to return.
In Europe, public transportation is not just an option, it's a culture. The metro in cities like London, Berlin, and Madrid is an essential part of daily life. People grow up knowing train maps as well as they know their neighborhoods. The trains are frequent, reliable, and often faster than driving through crowded streets. You can travel from one side of Paris to another in minutes without worrying about traffic jams. High-speed rail adds another layer. Imagine boarding a sleek train in Paris and stepping out in Brussels or Frankfurt in just a few hours. Europe's high-speed networks, like the French TGV or Germany's ICE, make traveling between countries feel as casual as taking a bus. Most European countries are part of the European Union, which gives EU citizens a number of advantages, one of the biggest being the right to move freely between member states. This has been one of the EU's greatest accomplishments, allowing people to travel across borders and even stay in another country for up to 3 months with nothing more than a passport or even just an ID card. No visas, no embassy visits, no complicated paperwork. Just go. This makes studying, working, or simply exploring in other European countries incredibly simple, and that kind of seamless movement is a huge part of smart design. By contrast, in the United States, the car is king. The nation was built during the era of the automobile, and cities grew outward instead of upward. Suburbs expanded, highways multiplied, and personal vehicles became symbols of freedom. Public transport exists, but in many cities it plays second fiddle to cars.
The U.S. government has long favored cars over public transportation.
We're spending far more, hundreds of billions more, on road improvement and infrastructure than we are on transit.
New York is the big exception, where the subway runs 24/7 and millions rely on it daily. But outside of a few urban centers like Chicago, Boston, or Washington, D.C., public transit often struggles to cover the vast sprawl of American cities. The result is that most Americans spend a huge part of their lives behind the wheel, commuting long distances each day. There's another layer to this: how transportation shapes the environment. Europe's compact cities make walking and cycling natural. Streets are narrow, often designed long before cars even existed, and bikes are integrated into the rhythm of life. In cities like Amsterdam or Copenhagen, bicycles outnumber cars. The U.S., however, was designed for wide roads and parking lots. Think of massive shopping malls surrounded by endless asphalt, spaces built for cars, not pedestrians. This difference means Europeans generally emit less carbon from transportation than Americans do, since fewer people rely on personal cars for daily trips. Now let's talk about airports. The U.S. has some of the busiest airports in the world: Atlanta, Chicago, Los Angeles, serving millions of passengers every year. Domestic air travel is common because distances are so vast. Flying from New York to Los Angeles takes 6 hours by plane, but would take days by car or train. In Europe, flying is also popular, but high-speed rail often replaces the need for short flights. Why fly from Paris to Lyon when you can get there by train in just 2 hours, city center to city center, without the stress of airport security or delays? Both regions are also pushing toward greener futures. In Europe, policies strongly encourage reducing car use. Congestion charges in London, low-emission zones in German cities, and subsidies for electric bikes and trains show how governments push people toward cleaner travel. Meanwhile, the U.S. is experiencing a boom in electric vehicles, led by companies like Tesla. Charging stations are spreading across highways, and the government is investing heavily in rail and transit upgrades. But it's a slower process because the country is so big, and its infrastructure so car-centered. Cultural attitudes also matter. In Europe, taking public transport doesn't carry a stigma. It's what everyone does, from students to business executives. A person in a suit riding the metro in Paris isn't unusual. In the U.S., however, cars are often tied to independence and status. For decades, owning a car was seen as a milestone of adulthood. Even today, many young Americans can't imagine life without one. Slowly, though, this is shifting, especially in younger generations living in cities where ride-sharing apps, bikes, and light rail are more common.
9, we're learning more about the upcoming transportation app from the Birmingham Jefferson County Transit Authority.
Technology is shaping the future of both continents. Europe is pushing digital ticketing systems, unified passes that work across buses, trains, and metros. You can use one app to travel across multiple countries. In the U.S., technology is focused on cars, self-driving vehicles, electric pickups, and smart highways. Both regions are experimenting with mobility as a service, where instead of owning a car, people subscribe to transport options that combine buses, scooters, ride shares, and trains in one package. Another big difference lies in freight. In the U.S., trucks dominate. Goods move across the vast highways carried by millions of semi-trailers that form the backbone of logistics. Rail is important too, but mostly for heavy cargo like coal or grain. In Europe, freight rail is more integrated with daily life. Trains carry not just raw materials but consumer goods, moving containers between ports and inland cities, helping keep trucks out of already crowded urban centers. And that design choice really matters. Take a look at these maps of road networks. The U.S. has an absolutely massive web of highways, far denser than Europe's road grid. But here's the twist. When we look at global traffic congestion, European cities don't dominate the rankings. In fact, many of the most congested cities in the world are in the U.S., despite all those roads. Why? Because simply building more highways doesn't solve traffic. It often makes it worse. Europe went the other direction, limiting car use while making alternatives attractive. And let's not forget parking. The United States has about 2 billion parking spaces for 250 million cars. That's roughly 8 spaces for every vehicle. In Europe, it's closer to 1 to 1. Even more shocking, the land dedicated to parking in the U.S. is larger than the land dedicated to housing people. Cities sprawl outward, devoting massive space to cars instead of communities. Meanwhile, European cities protect their density. There's less parking, fewer giant highways slicing through downtowns, and more space for housing, walking, and public life. Of course, both systems have their challenges. Europe faces the difficulty of maintaining old infrastructure. Many cities are centuries old, and squeezing modern transport into historic streets isn't easy. Think of Rome, where building a metro tunnel can mean digging through archaeological ruins. The U.S., on the other hand, faces the problem of scale. Its cities are spread so far apart that building nationwide high-speed rail, like Europe's, would cost astronomical amounts. And in some regions, people are so attached to their cars that getting them to switch to public transport is an uphill battle. In the end, transportation tells a story. It's the story of history, how cities were built, how people dreamed of mobility, how cultures defined freedom. It's the story of the present, how millions commute, travel, and explore each day. And it's the story of the future, how we will move in ways faster, cleaner, and smarter than ever before. Whether you are riding a sleek train under the Alps or cruising down an American highway with the radio on, transportation shapes not just your journey, but your life itself.